Welcome to the Hope on the Hard Road podcast, where you and your family can find community, find encouragement, and find hope for the road ahead. Speak encouraging words to one another. Build up hope so that you will all be together in this. 1 Thessalonians 5:11. Hey guys, welcome to today's podcast. You are going to love this next guest. Jess Ronne is an author, speaker, podcast host at Coffee with Caregivers, and associate producer of the Unseen documentary. She is founder and executive director of the Lucas Project, a nonprofit dedicated to providing recognition, resources, and respite support for special needs families. She and her husband Ryan live in Michigan with their 8 children, including their son Lucas, who has profound disabilities. Her story of beauty from ashes has been shared on the Today Show, Daily Mail, and the Huffington Post, and is detailed in her memoir, Sunlight Burning at Midnight, as well as her latest books, Blended with Grit and Grace and Lovin with Grit and Grace. So let's get started. Hey, Jess. Oh my goodness. It's so great to see you in person and to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
You know, just starting off, we'd love for people to hear your story, just a little bit of your background, your family story. That'd be great.
Well, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
My story is kind of intense. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. In 2004, I went to what I thought was a routine ultrasound appointment for my second child. And it was there that we were told that he had experienced a stroke in utero and there was very little hope. That became a period for me of an intense wrestling with my faith and believing that there would be healing for this baby, either on this or in this life or the next. Lucas was born 4 months later. On August 12, 2004, he came out screaming with life, and I just wept in relief. I couldn't believe my baby had made it. And people had asked, did you grieve the fact that you were a special needs parent because he was profoundly disabled? And I said, no, I grieved the fact that I thought my baby was going to die when he came out alive and was thriving. And then they sent me home with a baby. I was ecstatic. I didn't care what came along with them because I was under the impression that I would not be going home with a baby. So we went home and we settled into a very difficult life. He was delayed in every aspect. He never slept, all these things you hear about special needs kiddos. We went through for years and years. I don't even know how we managed, really. I mean, we were hardly sleeping. We ended up getting pregnant again in 2006, had our little girl in 2007. And then my husband began having all these really strange health problems. He was really disoriented. He was losing weight rapidly, just could not get his life together, was sleeping excessively. And he kept going to all these doctors and specialists who kept diagnosing him with type 1 diabetes, which was so strange. He was a professional tennis player, a gym owner, a personal trainer, and they just kept saying, you have to get your sugar numbers under control. And he would do everything right and could not get these numbers under control. So one night I said to him, I'm going to run across town to my dad's house. I got to pick up something real quick. Do you feel okay to watch the 3 kids? Because he would have good days and bad days. And he was like, yeah, I feel fine. So I ran across town. And as I pulled into my dad's driveway, my phone rang and I picked it up and it was Jason. And he said, Jess, call 911. And the phone went dead. So I rushed back home, come to find out he had a seizure, but before he seized until passing out, he had enough sense to put a movie in for Caleb, who was 4 at the time, put Lucas in his exerciser and put baby Mabel in her bouncy seat, and then he seized until he passed out. That led to one of the longest nights of my life. We ended up at the local hospital, where the doctor looked at me and said, we're going to run an MRI to rule out the possibility of a brain tumor. And I was like, oh, that's what it is. It all made sense then. And sure enough, he had a baseball-sized brain tumor. They did immediate surgery, took out the tumor. It was benign. So we were given the option to watch and wait and not pursue any treatments. And they said, these tumors often come back. Sometimes they don't come back for 15, 20 years. And that's what we were believing for. Like, we have been tested with Luke. We've been tested with Jason. Let's go home and live our life. And that's what we did. And in process of Jason feeling so well, we unexpectedly found ourselves pregnant again. So not a baby we were planning on. We had kind of discussed the idea of a fourth, but we weren't like in a space to want to go down that road with everything going on. But had we waited until our perfect timing, we would have never had a fourth.
Yeah.
So went through that pregnancy. Jason's having quarterly MRI appointments just to make sure the tumor hasn't grown back. And it's June. Oh, what year was it? Let me think. June 2009. And he goes for his quarterly MRI appointment and he calls me up annoyed. Jess, the tumor's back. I have to check myself into ER immediately. Checks himself in. It's another baseball-sized tumor. They take it out. And this time the biopsy comes back as a terminal grade 4 glioblastoma, which I had done enough research to understand that meant a life expectancy of about 14 months. So we had our baby Joshua in September. Jason fought with chemo and radiation until August 24, 2010. And then he passed away. And I was a young mom with 4 children, 6 and under, including Lucas, who had profound disabilities. And then you want me to keep going? Because it gets better.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I kind of settled into my new life as a solo mom with these 4 kids. And in some ways, there was this desperate loneliness, but to not have cancer on my back anymore for 3 years, there was a sense of relief there as well. And just really wanted to be married again, but didn't really know how to pursue that, with 4 kids. And Jason's mom even pulled me aside at the funeral and said, I'm praying for your next husband. I know you can't do this life alone and you need a godly man to come alongside you and do this with you. And a couple months later, I put the kids to bed and hopped on my blog where I'd kept the masses updated all through our journey. And there was a stranger from Pennsylvania who had commented just saying, I have no idea why I'm telling you this, but there's a young widower in Oklahoma who lost his wife to brain cancer 4 days after Jason died. He has 3 young children and he's not doing very well. I just think you could be a source of encouragement to him. So I found his blog, left a little comment, and woke up to an email the next day from him. Long story short, that blossomed very quickly. And we met in Savannah, Georgia, a few months later and contemplated getting married right then and there on the spot, but held off out of respect for families and ended up getting married about 6 months later. He moved to Michigan and then he was like, I can't deal with the snow here. Can we move somewhere else? And we ended up in rural Tennessee, 30 acres of land, living the simple life, had an 8th and final child together in 2015. And then moved back to Michigan a few years later. So here we are in Michigan now.
Amazing, amazing. Oh my goodness. You truly are amazing, Jess. And then just what a beautiful thing.
Well, it's such an inspirational story. I just love how you explained your son and what a gift he was when you were thinking of the initial diagnosis with your son. And then I know that led into the Lucas Project. So can you kind of tell, obviously you've had a full life. Like, when did the Lucas Project kind of take off? And, when were you inspired to do this and the steps that you took to where it is now and the mission of it?
Well, when Lucas was born, I vowed to him that I would one day start a nonprofit in his honor, kind of always thinking it would focus on helping the children. When we moved to rural Tennessee, we were extremely isolated. It was an extremely rural community with no resources or support for families like mine. And my husband, Ryan, at the time began having numerous panic attacks, and those would land him in the local ER where they just kept saying, you have to get your stress under control. And we were like, how is going through puberty. He's becoming aggressive. He's starting to hurt his siblings. He's starting to hurt himself. He's starting to hurt us. he's nonverbal, the behaviors, and there's nothing. And I just thought, I've always wanted to start this nonprofit, and I always thought it would focus on the children, but we are drowning. And if we don't get some help, Lucas can't be healthy. And just kind of this aha moment of we need to serve the caregivers with some sort of respite, and we need to bring awareness to what we go through, because I think our lives are so isolated and society doesn't see us because we just hole up at home because it's easier, because the world wasn't made for families like ours.
Yep.
And I can't tell you how many times people are like, I don't know of any special needs families. And I'm like, they're in your neighborhood. They are there. You just don't see them.
Exactly.
It might be invisible needs. It's not like the child in the wheelchair, maybe. It's some invisible needs that you would have no idea about. So just Googled how to start a nonprofit and printed off all the paperwork and filled it out and sent it in, and was like, okay, I guess I'm a nonprofit founder now. And contacted a local school and said, can we partner with you and use your facility? And they were great about it and allowed us to use their facility pro bono. And we launched once a month respite days out of the school. The parents had a 5-hour chunk of time to do whatever they wanted, completely free of cost. They could drop off their disabled child and the typical siblings, and we would provide all the fun activities, and they could just go take a break.
That's amazing.
And it was great.
Awesome.
That's amazing. How'd you staff that?
Mainly, the school we partnered with was a special needs school. So we relied very heavily on the teachers there and the volunteers there. But once they got behind it, we had a lot of volunteers. We didn't do anything like according to how we should have done it. Like I look back and I'm like, we didn't even have insurance. We didn't have like liability insurance. It was like, we want to do this and we're going to jump in. And then the pandemic hit and we had to kind of refocus all of our efforts, which led to our care package initiative. But now back here in Michigan, we are raising money for an in-person respite center. We want to replicate what we did in rural Tennessee, but do it right this time. We'll have insurance this time, background checks, all that stuff.
Oh, that's amazing. We so identify with what you're saying because same thing here, just being a family. Our daughter has behaviors we deal with a lot, just being so exhausted all of the time and realizing how much families needed that support. We just dove into starting a nonprofit, and, God has provided all along the way. It's been amazing. But it's so funny what you don't know, and then you stumble on it, right? So
step out in faith.
Yep.
You're just like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. But so speaking of that, the needs of the parents, the caregivers, right? I know that you and I have talked about that prior, and we're talking about it here. It is so necessary to support the parents. There's so many beautiful, wonderful programs out there for the children with disabilities and the adults with disabilities, but to be there for the families, for the parents. And so you actually started a documentary to sort of tell that story, right? Called The Unseen. Is that correct?
Yeah.
You want to share about that? We'd love to hear about it.
Well, that was our mission statement was created, and it included a desire to provide recognition and respite for special needs families. And the respite part was easy. And the recognition part was like, well, if society doesn't know, we're never going to get the support we need. So how can we make society aware? And I was writing essays for different media outlets like Huffington Post and the Today Show. And those were getting some traction, and just trying to start up my podcast. But it was like, we need something bigger where the whole world can see like what we go through. And I just thought, well, maybe a documentary. So 2018, threw out my idea on Facebook, like, hey, I have this great idea. My family always jokes, like my tombstone will read, Jess had a great idea. So, like, throw a dart at the board, put it out there. And a filmmaker from Nashville contacted me and was like, I'd love to meet up for lunch and just pick your brain on what you're thinking. And that 4 years later led to a documentary that has been picked up by PBS now. So they did an amazing job.
It's awesome. And that's really a lot of what our mission is. The kids have some resources going to schools, and, we have what's called regional center providing some services, but the parent and the family unit, kind of gets left out to dry with this. And they're the ones that, like you mentioned, no sleep and all the different things that, kind of go with that. So making that so aware of what that entails to have a special needs kid. It's not just the kid itself, it's the entire family. I mean, that's huge. I'm so glad that you're doing that and making that awareness, and kind of leading into that too, especially with a family of 8 kids. I mean, I would consider you an expert in working with siblings and how all that interacts. What advice do you have on all that with the relationships with this, with the kids and making sure all the kids feel a part of the family?
I used to have a lot of guilt about this, about not having like that dedicated one-on-one time as often as I wanted with each of the kids. And I had to kind of reframe my thought process in terms of we're a team and we're going to operate as a team and we're going to sit down for dinner as a family. And when Luke is struggling, we're going to gather around Luke and really be supportive of his needs. And when one of you is struggling, we're going to really gather around you as a family unit and be really supportive of your needs. And I think the Lord's been doing this work in my heart about this even. Like, we weren't created to live like individually or individual and separate from community. And I think we've kind of messed up this message even in parenting. Like, if you're not doting on your one child or 2 children like 24/7 and giving them all this individualized attention all the time, then you're doing them this big disservice. Well, I don't really agree with that. Like, we were created to do life in community. And sure, there are times when we absolutely see a child struggling and we intentionally reach into that child's life and create those really intentional moments. But our day to day, we're not like hyper focused on, well, this child didn't get the one-on-one time or this child didn't, or whatever that looks like. We're more focused on our family unit and what that looks like. And are we supporting each other and how can we better support each other? And the marriage is even above the children, because the greatest gift we believe we can give our children is that of an intact, healthy, thriving marriage. So that's our number one priority. And then it trickles down to the kids and making sure that we provide this framework where we are spending a lot of time together as a family doing activities. And I'll probably get some pushback for that. But it's just not possible with 8 children to constantly be thinking in terms of individuality. I'm not saying that correctly.
We get it. Totally.
You know what, though, I love about what you just shared, and maybe it goes counterculture, is by doing that, you're focused on the community, but you're also teaching your kids not to be selfish, right? Selfish. You're teaching them to be selfless. Yes. Where's the need? Where can I serve in the family? And it's just a beautiful picture of how, Christ really wants us to live. Yeah. Looking around us, where are the needs? Serve the needs before somebody tells you to serve them, and being other centered as opposed to self-centered, which is so much what our culture is focused on.
Absolutely. And we don't need any more narcissistic, self-centered individuals in this world. So it is countercultural, but it works for our family.
Yeah. I love it. And I love too, when you have so many children, when you have a larger family, and we have a lot of friends with larger families, you sort of circumstantially get to that point where you literally can't, like you said, just completely focus on one child at a time. So it's such a great perspective. It really is. And I think it's really inspirational too. You guys are a blended family, that you would say our marriage comes first, because there's so much to unpack there with your backgrounds, with both of you. How do you guys find time to focus on your marriage? Do you have any advice for our parents listening?
We're really intentional. We go on a weekly date night. We come together every morning and we pray together before we both head off our separate ways to work. And every night at 8:00, we go into our bedroom and we shut our door, and we watch our shows or whatever else we want to do without our kids around, because we believe that's really important. And they know, like 8 to 10, mom and dad are in their room. They can play games or watch TV or whatever they want to do, but they don't interrupt us during that time. And And I don't know, we knew from the very beginning, we got married with 7 children, that if we didn't make our marriage a priority, it would never last. So we've walked through some really difficult things. I mean, right now we have 6 teenagers.
Yep.
It's intense. 6 grieving teenagers with identity issues, and there's a lot there, but trying to stay united, stay on the same team. We have pressed into the Lord so deeply in this past year as we're trying to navigate all their pain and grief and stuff. It's a lot, but I think teamwork is essential when you're looking at something like that.
I love that. I love that teamwork. Yeah. That's big.
It's a great focus, in marriage, and then in having your kids be a part of that whole team situation as well. One of the challenging topics, I think, having kids with special needs is future planning. And I know you have quite the vision of moving forward with the Lucas Project and your son and so forth like that. And I believe it's called Hope Farm that you are creating. Can you really elaborate on that? I'm really inspired by some of the work you guys are doing up there, and would love to have our listeners and us as well, kind of see how that's all progressed and where it's going.
Hope Farm is separate from the Lucas Project. I feel like I should make that distinction often. Hope Farm is not a nonprofit, and it's not under the Lucas Project. Hope Farm is just a residential community that we purchased for our son Lucas and 3 of his friends who are also profoundly disabled. They currently all attend the same school. We're very close with the families. And again, it's going back to that teamwork and community model where we're creating a tribe almost through creating this home for our 4 children. And we're working as a team to get it up and running. And special needs families, I think, struggle so much with finding that community. And we've just found this to be a really beautiful way to find that community by coming together and creating this future living option for our children. And if we can figure out this model, we do want to teach like seminars or offer classes in the future through the Lucas Project, where we can encourage and help guide other groups of families to create something similar for their loved ones.
Absolutely.
Maybe if you don't mind going in a little bit of detail, I mean, is this a government-sponsored funding, or is it completely on your own? And, just kind of the vision for it, because this is a super exciting topic and super necessary. I mean, looking for future housing for your own children, if they, for special needs children, if they, need that kind of environment is challenging, and they're not really out there.
Oh, they're not out there at all. No.
So what you're doing and kind of highlighting, where it's been and some of the details, really love to hear and have our listeners hear too.
I can only speak from experience in Michigan, but I know we purchased the home, and people have been very generous, even with offering donations to help us fix up the home, because it does need a lot. We had to gut it, and now my husband's working for the next 3 months over there to make it an accessible living quarters for these 4 individuals. But we've partnered with a home health care company, and our local community mental health has provided the funding for each individual's care. So that won't come out of our pocket at all. That's completely government funded. The house situation we did pay for, but we will collect rent from the 4 individuals living there via their Social Security checks. So we're just going to be acting as the landlord for the property, and the home health care company will take on the entire aspect of the care portion, because I didn't want to mess with that. I don't want to be liable for finding care, and that seemed really big to me. But the landlord portion, my husband's already a landlord. He flips houses. Like, that felt really familiar to us. And if it's successful, we're talking about maybe purchasing a few more homes in West Michigan and just recreating the model repeatedly, as long as it's, flourishing and is helpful to people. And which, I can't imagine it wouldn't be helpful, because there's nothing. So,
right?
There are no options.
Exactly. You're providing an option. And so hopefully, the entities that can support something like that will get on board. For us, your, what's it called again? Mental health care program
Community
that's
mental
providing
health. Yeah.
community mental health. For us, that's similar to our regional center here in California. And so, I mean, these are things that, right now, this particular podcast episode is going to be in the midst of our future planning series. And so this is something that we want families to be aware of. There are options. Let's get creative here and figure things out, because eventually the reality is, we know this, our children are going to potentially outlive us, most likely outlive us, and they will need a place that's safe and thriving for them to live. And so we just are so inspired by what you're doing.
Absolutely. And it seems like a realistic model to duplicate if you're you're simply looking at, I don't want to use the term simply, it's not simply, but you're looking at being a landowner, leasing it out to the people, and then not creating a company that's going to provide for all their other needs. You're just simply a landlord like anybody else, renting a place out and doing that, which is something, you can model without taking all that liability of all the other things with the healthcare needs and so forth like that. So I think it's really, a lot of wisdom going into how you guys are creating that, and the potential for duplicating it is certainly there. So,
and if you have other families who are willing to do it with you, it's not the whole expense isn't on you either. So to find a property and split that among 4, 5, 6 families, it becomes much more feasible to create something like that.
Exactly. And then as far as the state, responsibilities, this is not like a state license. This is more private.
Well, we could have licensed it, and we chose not to because we wanted just to maintain a little bit more autonomy over the process. But had we licensed it, we would collect more in rent. Their Social Security checks actually go up if you license the property. But we may do that in the future if we're looking at it. If we're looking at the process and wanting it to be profitable, because we are investing a lot of work. And I know that rubs some people the wrong way. Like, well, you should just do it for the good of people. And it's like, well, we still need to live. And
right. So it needs to be sustainable.
It has to be sustainable and profitable if we're going to do this. But with our child, we wanted more autonomy over the situation. And so we decided not to license it, which capped us at 4 individuals. But if we were to license in the future, I think in Michigan, that caps you at like 13 individuals. Seems like way too many to me in one house, but you do have the potential to have it be much more profitable if you wanted to look at that option.
Yeah, it's so interesting, the differences in the states. And yet, anyways, it's just so interesting. And you do want to check out, anyone who's listening, you want to check out what your state laws are and the licensing and all that, those things. But, oh my goodness, Jess, thanks for sharing, because it's just, I think it's going to be inspiring for a lot of families, especially those that are in our age range, with kids in our age range, coming up on that. So yeah, when you look back at your story, and of course you're still in the middle of it, but what's one thing you wish you could tell yourself looking back? And then what's one thing you're happy you did as you're journeying along with special needs and all that entails?
I think looking back, I wish I would have celebrated the small wins more rather than constantly focusing on like, why isn't he walking yet? He's 5 years old. I mean, he started to walk at 8 and it was this huge thing. Like he was walking,
absolutely.
But I was so focused on the why isn't he's rather than on the, wow, look what he did, and trying to stay a little bit more present in those moments because it goes so quickly. And I mean, now he's almost 19 and I've entered this point of like, Luke is exactly as God created Luke, like nothing missing, nothing broken. He is who he is supposed to be. And I can celebrate that now at 19. I wish I would have learned that lesson a lot earlier rather than always trying to fix him. I think we spend so much time fixing rather than just celebrating the child we have and enjoying the child we have.
Yeah.
Such good advice, and keeping a spirit of positivity and hope is, it's just, there's plenty that you can look through a lens and be discouraged. So trying to find the things that are hopeful, the things that are, good, the things that we can keep our spirits going. And of course, keep that in prayer and everything else to make sure that is certainly, that's great advice. One of the things we always like to, ask the people that come on the program is, what is one thing that you would tell our listeners to encourage them and give them hope on the road ahead?
I think wherever you are with your child, start thinking about the future, and then allow yourself permission to change your mind too. I think when Luke was 5, I was like, he will never, ever, ever, ever live apart from me, and I'll be his caregiver forever. And of course, he was a cute little boy.
Yes.
And then he went through puberty and he blossomed into manhood. And now I have this almost 19-year-old that I'm his primary caregiver. And it's a lot. And I don't know that that's in Luke's best interest or my best interest to be his primary caregiver for the rest of our lives. I'll always be his caregiver in some capacity, but I'm ready to just be his mom. I think being his caregiver has been the overarching theme of our life, and it's almost detracted from the mother-son relationship in some aspects because the care has been overwhelming at times. And I'm ready to hand that baton off, and just be mom and just hang with him and eat a meal with him and watch a movie with him and not be so hyper-focused on all the care needs.
That is so good. And thank you for being so honest about that, because I think that just gives permission to so many of us parents to realize that that's healthy and that's good. And we have the right to be mom, to be dad, and to enjoy those things with our kiddos. We sort of took this mantle on the minute we were handed this child that we love so much, and we feel this absolute responsibility to be their caregivers, but to take a step back a little bit and say, it's good and right to want to just be mom and to be, just be dad, like we would with any of our other kids. So I'm really thankful that you shared that, Jess.
And to not feel guilty about that, because guilt can come in all the time. And we're not the one ultimately in control of all the things that go on with our child. And that's where faith steps in, and that's where the hope is. We try to create the best environment, to create the best scenario for them growing up, and hope. But ultimately, our hands are up in the air so many times as well. Like, God, what are you doing? And to celebrate who they really are as a person and who God created them to be. That's a huge place to come to with your child when they have a disability.
Yeah.
Well, it dawned on me one day, like a yes to being Luke's caregiver for the rest of, primary caregiver for the rest of his life is a no to so many other aspects of my life, including my marriage, my other children, my future grandchildren, myself. And, does Luke really want his mom bathing him? Or would he prefer somebody else caring, taking care of those daily needs, and mom can just be mom? And I don't know exactly. Luke's nonverbal, but I have to think that some sort of separation would be good for both of us in the long run.
Again, just so good and so true. Our kids grow up, and in a typical scenario, that's what's healthy is that healthy separation and that healthy growth, and that allows for some growth. We've seen that with our daughter is just that, you think you have to do everything, and then she actually thrives with another caregiver,
exactly.
Right? Something goes on and you're like, oh, I didn't actually have to be there for that.
Didn't know he was capable of that. Oh, yeah. He does that for me all the time. Why don't you do that for me?
Yeah,
yes.
Well, exactly. So that just gives hope. Thank you.
For us, we just, came back from a week away from our daughter for the first time since she's been born. Yeah. And she's fine.
Yeah.
Everything's fine. And it's like our world just got bigger because we took that step to not feel guilty and say, we're going to celebrate our marriage, 25 years of it, and we're going to take a step and just say, hey, our life is bigger than just caretaking, like you said, and God blesses that, you know, and the world gets bigger, and yet we're not saying no to, you know, being the parents and helping and so forth like that. But like you said, the world got bigger, you know, the different aspects of our life, and it's just great wisdom, you know, in terms of living. So appreciate that so much.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, Jess, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this subject and sharing your life with us. That's so sweet, and we just so appreciate it. So it was great to talk with you today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And good luck on all the new endeavors.
Right.
We'll be watching, and we always have show notes after, so everyone check out all of Jess's resources because they are just invaluable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Resources and contact information for today's podcast will be included in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share us with others and be sure to follow us so you won't miss an episode. And we'd love to hear from you, so please leave us a comment or rating and connect with us on social media or on our website at hopeonthehardroad.org.